ask you, in terms of the book that you wrote, is if you were to rewrite it, would you do something different? Because years have passed, lots of information also came your way. I think even after the book, you came more into Leonora's work than when you were writing it. So let's say that somebody or the publisher would say, we'll do a second edition. Would you write a different introduction, or even some of the chapters? Would you do anything different, or would you say that?
I think, like any artistic project, any book anybody writes, it's of its moment, and you hope to tap into themes that are going to continue, beyond the time the book comes out. But I don't think I would ever write any book I've written or any piece of journalism exactly the same at another moment, because the moment is part of the project, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that moment when I wrote this book, it was just a year before the anniversary of the centenary of Leonora's birth. Obviously a few years had gone by since her death by then. So I processed some of it, some of my relationship with her, I think, but it's an ongoing story for me. So I think if I was writing it now, it would be different. Mm-hmm. As you rightly say, after the book came out, several things happened, and I'm guessing that happens often to biographers. People get in touch, they tell you new bits of the story, you maybe get a chance to go to new places. Like I got a chance to go to Chicago. Mm-hmm. I'd already been to New York, but I'd never been to Chicago, so I was able to explore elements of Leonora's life in Chicago. Another big thing that happened though, the most exciting thing really after the book came out, was a woman got in touch who was in her 90s, she's still alive today, and she had been Leonora's friend in Lisbon. So the events I described in the book, where Leonora reconnects with Max Ernst, surprisingly, for both of them, in Lisbon, this woman, Mary, knew that. She'd been there. She remembered Leonora coming back to the hotel and saying, something amazing has happened, I've met Max. So that was really a really big discovery, that there was somebody alive who remembered those events. So when the English language edition of the book came out in paperback, there's an extra chapter with Mary in, and with other elements like the trip to Chicago. So I guess for me, the more time goes by, the more things I'm going to know about Leonora. And one thing I always knew actually was, I came into this house in 2006. She was here, I knew her, I got to know her. I knew she was going to be a very important person in my life. I returned many times. I made, I think, a decision that while she was alive, I would concentrate on her. So I did curate an exhibition of her work, but I was working with art historians and professionals, and I think somewhere at the back of my mind I knew that the very likely course of events was that Leonora would die before I died, and when she had gone, there would be this new realm for me to discover. Her work, of course I'd seen many of her paintings. I'm not saying I didn't know anything about them. I knew lots about them, and some of them were in this house and she showed me them. But I feel like since she's gone, there's a new layer for me to her paintings. I'm more interested in her paintings because she's not here, so that's how I find her.
Mm-hmm. Well, that actually leads me to the next question I had, which is, now that you've come back to Mexico after all these years, you come in a very particular date in terms of the anniversary of Leonora's 10 years since she died, and you come back to this house. How do you imagine that the repercussion of Leonora's work and life will be from years to come? Because I think Leonora is pretty much, even though she's an extremely well-known artist, I think we're just beginning to know about her art, her ideas, and so on. It's something that is pretty much yet to be discovered. So what's your impression that, for example, would happen? This, I think, the house that we're in right now, it's a very important piece of the puzzle. So how do you imagine that in the next years this is going to explode?
I mean, since Leonora's death in 2011, I have returned to Mexico many times, but I never came back to this house. So I've often been back in Mexico for various reasons, but I've never stepped. The last time I stepped over the threshold of this house, she was here saying goodbye, and then 10 years later, here I am, and the house is just as I remember it, but she's not here anymore. When she was alive, at the end of the last years, I used to tell her about things that were going on. People used to get in touch with me and say, can we meet Leonora? And the answer was usually no. You know, she was a woman in her 90s. It was not fair to be bringing people in. But I always replied, and I kept in touch, and then I would say to her, you know, oh, so many people get in touch with me, and also there'd be a sale of a painting, and the first painting that went for more than $1 million US, and I called her and said, one of your paintings has just sold for more than $1 million US. And we used to joke about something that's now come true, which is that there would be like mugs and t-shirts with her work on, and now I have the t-shirt and I drink my coffee from her mug with her work on it. So I think at the very end of her life, you know what the Guerrilla Girls say, you have to be, a woman artist has to be dead before she's famous. I think Leonora, unfortunately for her, exactly fits that profile, because I think that she's that while, you know, she had a long life and she died aged 94, I feel like her legacy is still in its infancy, and I think that going forward she's going to become much better known. And I think that particularly because I think her themes are so relevant to the 21st century. I think the things that she's interested in as an artist and as a human being are things that really speak to us in the present moment, and that's remarkable and, you know, really important. I think also if we look at a character like Frida Kahlo, it was, you know, I mean, when Frida was alive, people didn't think that she would be the most famous artist of the couple that was her and Diego Rivera, and her work, you know, well, it started with a book, didn't it, a biography, and then it grew. Her story, and like Leonora, Frida Kahlo had a fascinating story as well as amazing art, and I think there are parallels between the two of them. Having said that, I think Leonora's work is harder to unpack. It's not as straightforward, or it doesn't appear as straightforward as Kahlo's work might appear. I'm not saying that Kahlo's work is simple at all. And Leonora was not, unlike Frida Kahlo, she wasn't always looking at herself. She was looking at the world around her more than in a different way from Frida. But anyway, that's just to say that, yes, I do think that going forward that she's going to be much better known. And I think, you know, you just have to look at galleries around the world are wanting her work, buying her work. There's a new work MoMA recently acquired a work, the Boymans in Rotterdam recently acquired a work, the Tate have got a work that they've had for a few years now. Galleries want her in there, big galleries want to have her work, and her writing, you know, the Hearing Trumpet has never been out of print, and there are newly published collections of her short stories. You know, she's far from disappearing. There's also a recent band in LA released a single that's all about that's all about her, and just so much is happening. So I think definitely we're going in that direction.
I don't know if this same phrase is used in English, but in Spanish we have a phrase that says nobody is a prophet in their own land. I don't know if you heard that before. So that being said, do you think that more and more England and Ireland would want to recognize Leonora's work in terms of making her their own? Because I think Mexico is pretty much there, because she lived here for more than 60 years. We have the house, their 2 children were born here. I think Mexico is very much Leonora's land. She really made it her own, but the relationship, you know, with England and with Ireland was always complicated in her biography. Do you think in years to come they would want to make Leonora their own?
Well, in 2010, and this was what gave me the possibility of continuing to visit Leonora, I co-curated an exhibition of her work that was the first exhibition that there'd been of her work in the UK for 20 years. And that was in Chichester at Palm House Gallery, and then it moved to the Sainsbury Centre in Norwich. And it got there was a lot of interest. I think at the time it was the biggest footfall that gallery, Palm House, had ever had for that show. Huge amount of press interest, very positive kind of response to the work. And since then, in Dublin, there's been a big exhibition of her work, which particularly looked at the Irish connections with her art. And there's now a new exhibition planned, admittedly, for Europe, not for the UK. And I know you're asking about the UK and Ireland, but I think one of the issues for people in Britain, art historians, as well as the public, is that Leonora's work is very scattered. It's all over the place. A lot of it's in Mexico, a lot of it's in private collections. And one of the things I've learned over the last 10 or 15 years, while I've been trying to kind of champion Leonora's work, is how, I mean, it sounds so basic, but how important it is to have an artist's work in public collections. It's really crucial. And Leonora's work has not been in public collections in the UK. Another acquisition, very important one actually, I forgot to mention, is in Edinburgh, which is really the central place of surrealist art in the UK. And they recently, in the last couple of years anyway, acquired Leonora's portrait of Max Ernst. Very important addition to their collection. So yeah, I think that as her work, that there hasn't been a great enough appreciation in the UK of the breadth of her work. And when we look at the exhibition that was here 3 years ago, the big kind of retrospective at MAM here in Mexico City, the Museum of Modern Art, I think everybody who went to that exhibition was just blown away by the breadth of Leonora's output. You know, we all knew that she was a tapestry artist and a sculptor, as well as a painter and a writer, and that she designed all the sets and the masks for her plays. But to see that work all together, it really gave you a sense of the scale of this woman, the Renaissance character she truly was. And when you look at art and artists, that's the hallmark of a great artist, that they work often, you know, almost always across many fronts, and they're always trying new things, and they work in different dimensions, different directions. And it took an awful lot of work to bring all that together. But I think that was a very important moment for her. And sadly, I can't imagine a show like that happening in the UK. Most of that work came from America or Mexico. To ship it all over, especially in this moment when, as we know, the arts are going to be constricted and under threat going forward, rather than the opposite. I mean, it would be honestly the greatest dream I can imagine to take a show like that to Britain. And I totally know that it would change the story of Leonora in Britain. But that's not going to be possible, so we'll just, you know, we just chip away. We try and get more works into public collections. I don't think that there's, I think as she becomes better known, I think the reception is there for her. Having said all that, of course she did reject Britain, you know, she left, as my family would say, she went. And that's a big statement, to leave your country. It is a big statement. I think she might have liked to have gone back more than she did, but life came along, you know, life went the way it did for her. And Mexico gave her this brilliant home and place and space to create the art she'd always had inside her and known that her life was going to be about creating?
It's easy to see, of course, we can call it the Mexicanism in Frida Kahlo's work or in Diego Rivera's. It's obvious almost, but it's not obvious in Leonora's. And Pablo was telling me the other day that well, one of the reasons why he decided to finalize the donation to our university was because he was grateful, you know, to Mexico in general, to welcome their parents when they were being persecuted as political, I don't know what's the word, for their political ideas. And Mexico, you know, opened the doors for them. They had a home here, they made a family. But he was very, very sure that only in Mexico Leonora would become Leonora. In terms of these Mexican themes, it's not that obvious in her work. But I definitely think that's one aspect that needs to be discovered somehow. And probably the house, in terms of the objects that we have, in terms of the books that we have, the things that she would read, would bring light to that. So because it's a very light thread. It's not there, you know, in the figures or in the colors, but maybe in the themes. And that's something that eventually I think will be very, very nice to find out.
To find out more about the Mexican
influences. More about the Mexican influences.
I mean, I think you know, she came here with aged, what was she when she arrived in Mexico? 24, 25. Yeah. And so much had happened in her life. Do you want me to say the things? Do you want me to rehearse that a bit, to say the kind of things that had happened to her?
Sure.
Or is that going to be... I mean, she arrives here aged 24, 25, and so much has happened already in her life. You know, she's grown up in this family that she didn't feel connected to. She's been expelled from boarding schools. She's been sent to Europe to finishing schools. She's come out as a debutante. She's not found a husband. She's run away with a much older artist. She's completely cut herself off from her family, from her parents who can't get their heads around that. She's travelled across war-torn Europe. She's had a wonderful time with her lover in this amazing house in the south of France. Then they've been separated. Then the most terrible moment of all, you know, she's had time in an asylum. Then she's in New York with the surrealists. Then finally, she comes here with her first husband, Renato Leduc. Now, she's already lived probably 5 lifetimes already, and she's going to unpack all of that in her art. So the way I see it, you know, it's like total overload. She arrives in Mexico. Mexico's a fascinating place on its own. If she was coming here as a blank sheet of paper and nothing had happened to her, Mexico explodes. But she's already got all this stuff to unpack, because all of this has happened, and you know, so there's all of that to unpack in her work. And then I think as Mexico begins to creep into her work. So if you look at those early paintings, the paintings which I personally think are the most fantastic moment of her career, the early 1940s, those paintings constantly reference her story in Europe. But then I think when you move further into the 60s and 70s, she's maybe done that, and she's looking now at the world around her, and Mexico is coming more into her paintings. And then of course the mural she did for the Anthropological Museum that she did here in this house, The Magical World of the Mayans, that's totally infused, isn't it, with Mexico.
Yeah, definitely.
So you know, she just had an awful lot of experiences and life to unpack in her art. It's a good thing she lived 94 years.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a very interesting point that you made. That, yeah, that's true. She probably needed the rest of her life to rest for the first 20 years of her life. In terms of everything that happened.
And then, you know, she got here, and very soon after she got here, she divorced, and then she met Cheeky, and then she became a mother very quickly. I mean, being a mother is a very big thing in a woman's life. Being a parent is a big thing in a human being's life, and that takes up a lot of time and energy. And that again, you know, she used to paint. She used to say that she used to paint with the baby in one hand and the paintbrush in the other. You know, so that was another big important experience.
Definitely.